In today's video, I'd like to talk about how to create cinematic atmosphere in Blender as easily as possible. I created this little scene with my main character Nerea standing in the middle of this grotto, this little cave, and there are two atmospheric elements I want to add, fog and particles in the air. Now, instead of relying on volumetric simulations or geometry nodes, I'll be using a simple plane technique to achieve similar results, and I'll be showing it to you in real time. So what I'll be doing right now is I created a little like collection here called atmospheric, and inside of it I'll be adding in a plane. I'm going to be moving this plane forward, rotating it on its x-axis at 90 degrees. I'm going to move it up here and just scale it up, just like that. So you want the plane to cover the camera view as much as possible. I'm going to just rename the plane to fog dash or slash FG. FG meaning foreground, because we're going to have two levels to our fog. And so now that I have my plane added here for the fog, I'm going to go into the shader editor and I'm going to add a new material to our fog. And I'm just going to remove the principled BSDF here, and I'm going to add in a mix shader node, and in it will be connected two things, an emission node as well as a transparent node. There we go. So what the mix shader node does essentially is it allows us to, well, like the name states, to mix between two shaders along these factor slider here. So if I go all the way up to 1, I'm pretty much working on the emission node, and if I put it all the way down to 0, then I'll just be using with the transparent node. So what we're going to do here, first of all, you're noticing this very grainy like effect on the transparency, and we don't want that. We want it to be smooth. Very simply, in the shader editor, press N in order to have your your menu open here. Go down to options. In the render method, change it from dithered to blended, and now if you switch, you can notice it's a lot smoother. So what we're going to do, you're going to see this is very simple. We're just going to move those down a little bit. I'm going to use a procedural node texture to create and give texture to my fog. So I'm going to add here a noise texture. I'm going to press Control T in order to add in here a texture coordinate and mapping node. In order to do this, you need to have your node wrangler add-on turned on or enabled. If you don't, here's how to do it. Go to your edit, go to your preferences settings, and within the add-on tab here, type here node wrangler and just make sure it's turned on. And then when you press Control T, when clicking on a texture noise like the noise texture one, then you'll automatically have a texture coordinate and mapping node added. So what we're going to do now is connect this node, this noise texture node into a color ramp. And then we're going to take this color ramp and plug it into the factor socket. And now probably immediately you might notice a little bit of a fog texture effect here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the white slider, click on its color, and just reduce its value a little bit, because we don't want it to be too opaque. We still want to be able to see the character in this scene. But who knows, maybe in your scene you want the fog to be more intense. It's up to you what you prefer. But essentially what I'm going to do too, I'm going to change the linear to ease, and I'm just going to push the black slider up a little more and push the gray one a little bit forward as well, so it gives me a better contrast for the fog. And then what I can do here, maybe I want to scale it. I want it to look a little bit bigger. Maybe I'm going to add a little bit of distortion, and there we go. Maybe a little less distortion, not too much. 0.21 or something. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is just verify a little bit here. Okay. Okay, this kind of looks good to me. So what I'm going to do now is I want to animate the fog, because the fog moves, you know, and an animated scene. So the way to do this is if you go to your mapping node here, you have your location values that you can play with on the X, Y, or Z axes. In my case, I want to move it on the X axis. So in order to move it from left to right, I have to move the X location towards the negative values. is in order to give it an animation automatically, I'm just gonna go here. I'm gonna click on my X value. I'm gonna press hashtag frame / minus. I don't know. I want to do something very slow. So the higher the number I'm gonna put in, the slower the animation. I'm gonna try 1200 and see what it does. I'm just gonna reduce, I'm gonna go here and just disable Neria's character model because she's a little too high poly. I want to make sure that we can still play and view. Okay, a smooth transition. So as you can see here, this is slow enough for me. I like that. But what I want to do too is just give a little bit of variation within the animation of the fog. So what I'm going to do, if I go to noise texture and I go from 3D to 4D, you have this added socket here called the W. And if I just pause the animation for a second and I play with the W, you see it moves the fog here as much as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the driver line that I put in here for the X value. I'm going to paste it in the W value here. Let's see the effect that it does. And I like it. It's slow, it's not too fast, and it's I like the way it shifts. It's very slow and subtle. So I'm going to keep this in. I'm going to re-enable Neria here because I want to see her, but I'm just going to, I'm going to simplify. There we go. Okay. No, this is nice. I like it. And also, if you want to give your fog some color, what you can do is if you go under emission here, whatever color you give it, it'll be applied on here as well. For now, I'm going to go for just like a slight light blue color, maybe more towards violet, or no, blue is nice. Blue is good. All right, so you can end here, but we can push it a little further. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this plane, the fog FG, and I'm going to duplicate it, move it back on the y-axis, like here, and I'm going to scale it up just more, just like that. And I'm going to change its name to fog BG for background. All right, there we go. So what I'm going to do in this case, let's see, I want to move it a bit more forward. So I'm just taking a look, or just to see. Yeah, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to move it forward a little bit, just so that it clips a little bit through her hair to give this sense of depth. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the shader editor, and I'm going to duplicate its material. So now it's separate from the other one, but it's copied the same settings. And typically fog, the further it gets away, like the harder it is to see through, like the more opaque it becomes essentially. So what I could do is I could go here and just boost up the value just a tiny bit more, just like that. And then I can also go back to the foreground plane and maybe boost the values, decrease the values down a little bit just to see what would work, maybe just a tiny bit. I'll go back to the background, and now what I'll do, I want to give it variation. I don't want it all to look the same. So maybe I'll increase the scale a little bit. So maybe in the background, it's a little bit more, texture's more defined, maybe a bit more texture. And what I could do too here, I can maybe make it move slower in the back. So maybe instead of 1200, I'll put 2400. If I play, okay, so essentially what you got now is 2 layers of fog playing in the background here. One thing that we could do as well, if I go back into camera view, is if I go to the background fog, I can also play with its colors just to separate it a little more from the other. So I can maybe go more to like a darker blue. Yeah, maybe a bit of a darker blue, just like that. And now you have like a darker blue in the background and a lighter blue in the foreground, just like that. And we got ourselves like a fog effect with Neria right here. If I take a look at it here, I'll maybe add in a bit more details in the foreground. Maybe if I make it a bit more contrasty, no. Add maybe a bit more detail like this. Play a bit more with the distortion. Just a tiny bit. There we go. So just to give you a before and after view, So if I just stop it here, what I'll do is I'll remove the atmospheric and add in the atmospheric back. So you do notice a bit of a difference here. There's a bit more atmosphere going on. Now, what I like to do as well is add in particles in the air. And we're going to use the exact same technique, but we're going to just do it a little bit more differently. So I'm going to go back into my viewport here. In the atmospheric collection, I'm just going to add in another plane. I'm going to move it forward, and I'm going to put it, I'm just going to rotate it on the X axis, and I'm going to put it behind the initial fog layer. So if you're taking a look, you might be reminded of a bit of a 2D workflow, right? So you're putting layers behind layers essentially. I'm going to increase it like this, and I'm going to name it particles FG for foreground. There we go, and now we're going to go into the shader editor, give it a new material, delete the principal BSDF, and same thing, you want to add in a mix shader node setup. Alright, so emission at the bottom, transparent at the top, shader here. Perfect. Same as always, every time you create a new material, make sure to change the render method from dither to blended so we can keep it as smooth as possible. And now what we're going to do to create particles is we're going to use a Voronoi texture. So let's add one here. There we go. Control T so we can add in the texture coordinate and mapping nodes. And then we're going to take the distance socket, connect it here to a color ramp. And then connect the color ramp to the mix shaders factor socket. You'll notice off the bat where we have the inverse effect of what we want. So we're just going to inverse the white and black sliders, and all of a sudden, as you can see, we got ourselves some particles. Obviously I want them to be a little smaller, so I'm going to play with the scale value here. And now with the black slider, I can actually sort of affect the density of those particles. So as you can see, we're not playing here with, volumetrics, geometry nodes, or anything too complicated. We're just playing with planes and shader editors, which is much simpler, not only for the computer, but also for yourself as a user. So let's see here. I feel like they could get a little bigger, to be honest with you. We can make them a little bigger. Maybe if I move this to something like this. Okay, and then to color them, you can use the emission node here to give them some kind of color. But honestly, what I'd rather do, rather than playing with the emission node directly, I'd rather have a gradient of colors for a particle. So I'll just quickly add in a gradient node here. Control T to give it its texture, coordinate, and mapping nodes. Connect that to a color ramp. Whoops. Color ramp. There we go. And then connect that into our emission socket. And now we can play with the colors. So I want to go with maybe like a blue, violet-ish color scheme. So I could go with like a dark blue here. And then here we could go with like a lighter violet type. So you have this gradient of colors. Not the best color though. Let me just re-choose that. There we go, something along these lines. Or to be honest with you, no, I think I'd rather just keep it monochrome at one color, just blue. So I'll go from a dark blue to like a lighter blue, like that. I think that's better. If I just move the gradient a little bit more like this. There we go. So if I go full screen here, you'll notice what's on the left is darker blue, what's on the right is like a lighter blue. So I'd rather have that rather than just one uniform color. And now what we're going to do before animating those particles, we're going to have to play a little bit with the geometry of this particle's plane. So let me show you what I mean. I'll go into the 3D viewport here. Just for this viewport, I'm going to isolate that plane for the particles, and I'm going to go into edit mode. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add in a couple of, there we go, a couple of loop cuts here, a couple of loop cuts here as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the first row, move them down a little bit, second row, move them up a little bit, and I'm just going to randomize a little bit here the geometry, because essentially what we're doing, because we're going to play with the UV coordinates, we're creating a path for our particles to follow. So if you want your particles not to move exactly straight, but you want them to follow, like, you know, the turbulence of the air, to be affected by the atmosphere a little bit, this is a way to go about it. So just something along these lines is nice. I don't know if you can see, I'll maybe just switch my matte cap color directly to black, just so it's a bit more visible. So what I've done here, I've just selected my vertices here and just move them up and down. And you can just do it manually, which is a little bit better because you get a bit more randomized effect if you want. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my shader editor and I'm going to plug my UV socket here. And as immediately you can notice the path and the directionality here of my particles is now following that path that I just created. So if I animate it moving forward, you see they're moving according to those paths. It's a little jagged though, to be honest with you. So what I'll do is I'll just remove my simplify here so my subdivisions can be seen. I'll just for a moment remove Nuria, disabler. And for my particles foreground plane, I'm going to add in a subdivision subdivision surface modifier here. And the reason why is because it'll smooth out the like the geometry on my plane. So now if I move my particles, it's a little bit smoother than before. If I put it to 2, yeah, it's a little similar. There we go, just like that. And what you can also do is maybe you want to stretch out these particles just a little bit, because you want to sort of pretend, like not pretend, but like play with the motion blur effect. So that's why you can scale them out a little bit on the x-axis, just like that. So they can move on or move forward just like this, but that's a little too much. So maybe, yeah, it's better. I don't want to do it too much, but because there isn't like any violent wind here. You want to keep everything consistent, all the animations consistent. And so what I can do is I can go here and same as before, we can create a like an automated animation by typing in hashtag frame / in our case maybe minus, let's try 1200 like the other one. Let's press play. It's a little slow, to be honest, so if you want it to be faster, you can make it to be faster. I don't want it to be too fast though, so maybe I'll just put it to 900. And don't forget, the lower the number, the faster the animation. The higher the number, the slower the animation. So if I, for example, put 12 instead of 1200, see, it moves very fast. So it depends on what you're trying to do. In my case, 900. Yep, 900 is nice. So what we can do in a case like this is, because you want to create the illusion of depth. And so what you can do is go back to your viewport and take this plane and then duplicate it just like we did with the fog backwards like this. Let's put Nuria back on here so we can sort of see what it looks like. Okay, maybe the particles are also going to be going like through her hair, behind her hair, just like that. I'll put back the gray matte cap. It's a bit more visible. But what we're going to do this time, well, first we're going to change its name back to particles BG for background. There we go. And then we're going to go back to our shader editor and we're going to like duplicate that material so it's separate. And the first thing I want to do always when you're doing a duplicate of particles is make whatever's in the back darker, more dim than what's in the front. So off the bat, what I'm going to go to my color ramp here, go to the white slider and reduce that to a lower color, to a lower value, sorry, to a grayish value. And what we're going to do is I'm going to make him smaller. And I'm going to make the mover just a little bit slower. So instead of 900, I'll put maybe 1000. There we go. So when you press play, actually let me just remove Nuria again. And I'll put full screen. You can notice that they're moving from a different motion than what's in the front. The back particles are moving at a different speed and motion than the ones in the front. And so what I want to do right now is maybe go back to my particles from the foreground and maybe increase the emission strength to like 3. So they're way more visible than what's in the back. And there you go. Much, much better. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to put Nuria back on in the scene just to get a feel of the whole scene put together. Okay. I like it, but I just want to reduce the stretching that I've done initially. So particles foreground, let's go here, 0.6, let's put it back to maybe 0.9. The BG, same thing. Maybe these I'll put to 1, maybe. And this looks a little bit better. If I press play. Obviously, let me just put back my simplify so it's okay. The speed makes sense. Okay, very nice. So the last thing I want to talk about really quickly is the because some of you might not be aware, but the glow effect that we have is thanks to the compositor. So what you want to do, first of all, make sure in your viewport, whether you're in material, viewport shading view, or in the material preview or the render, make sure you always have your compositor set to always if you want to add in bloom. So this is disabled, this is always disabled, enabled, disabled, enabled. And essentially it allows you to play, as you can see here, with the glow effect. What I have here is just a bit complicated, but what you really just want is just connect your image into the glare node, and then the glare node connected to your composite and viewer nodes, and then you can play with your settings here. You can have different kinds of glow effects, but what I typically go for is either bloom or fog glow, and the rest is up to you really. And when you play with the threshold, you can play with how bright the image can get depending on the light values of each shader on screen. So today was a very simple showcase of an effect, but as you can see, if I go to the atmospheric and I took it off, this is before the atmospheric effects, and this is with the atmospheric effects. So this is the tutorial for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section below, and I'll get to those as quickly as possible. Thank you. Bye-bye.